Good morning, good morning. This is the lovely podcast, The Endurance of Labor Laws. I am your lovely host, Lesley Sullivan, and this is episode 16. And today we're going to be taking a look at the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. So this one, the abbreviation is IBEW. So let's go ahead and go over just the key points first, and then we'll dive right into it. So let's get this puppy started. So it says here it was founded in 1891. I love it when things are founded before the 1900s and when they're still active today, even though I don't have the same positive opinion of unions as I did before I started this lovely podcast. I still love historical data and the history in those respects, because I think when you have an organization that was founded so long ago and is still current, that they are doing their best to stay alive in their industry, even if they have scandals and things like that. Even if I don't completely agree with them, I'm always impressed with organizations that stand the test of time. And that just always amazes me. And a good example of that is our country, the United States of America. We have stood the test of time, and our country has been through a lot. And, you know, whenever you have something that stands the test of time, it shows that you're strong and you have endurance. So regardless of whether you're talking about a labor union or your country or even your life and you surviving and staying alive. Like, for example, with me, I almost died because I got really sick and was put on a medication. And I know that God was with me throughout that entire journey for me. And I know that life is nothing to sneeze at. It is truly a blessing from God. Regardless of whether you believe in God or not, life is a blessing, and it is such a beautiful thing to have. So it's just one of those things, whenever I see an organization, whether it's a union or not a union, and it goes back before the turn of the century, that always gets my attention. Because also, what might be a good study to look at once we're done looking at all the labor unions within the United States, what I like to do personally, one of my hobbies, is to look up a random year in history and look at what was going on in the United States. And if we were not the United States yet, then I look at what was going on in the world in different countries and, you know, who were the major players at that time. You know, I might pick a random year like 1525. Or I might go back even further in time and go to the year 101 or something. Because those are real times and dates in the history of our planet, in the history of our world. And it's just neat to see what people did back then. So I've always had a fascination with historical data and with documentaries. That's one of my favorite things to watch, are documentaries. So this might be good to do a documentary on some of these labor unions. But anyway, let's go ahead and continue on with the basic facts of this. So they were founded in 1891. They are currently headquartered in Washington, D.C. They have locations in the United States, Canada, Guam, Panama, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. And it says here they have 775,000 members as of 2020. Their current president is Lonnie R. Stevenson, and they are affiliated with AFL-CIO, CLC, and NAMTU. So let's go ahead and take a look at the specifics. It says the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, also known as IBEW, is a labor union that represents approximately 775,000 workers and retirees in the electrical industry in the United States, Canada, Guam, Panama, Puerto Rico, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. In particular, electricians or inside wiremen, which I didn't know there was a difference between those two. It says in the construction industry and line workers, and other employees of public utilities. The union also represents some workers in the computer, telecommunications, broadcasting, and other fields related to electrical work. Now, that doesn't surprise me, because here in Oklahoma, we have quite a few people that work in construction. And sometimes it's a booming industry here in Oklahoma, and other times it's not. It's almost like the oil and gas industry here in Oklahoma, where we have these booms and then it goes down. We have these booms and it goes down. People, it's like industries, they overhire, then they overfire here in Oklahoma, so that happens a lot. But one of the things I notice is that we have a lot of electricians in and out of construction, especially when we have tornadoes here. We have a lot of down power lines, and sometimes our utilities, which one of them is OG&E, That's the main one in the state of Oklahoma. But we also have cooperatives, co-ops, that handle these smaller towns in Oklahoma. And sometimes they outsource their labor temporarily to bring in people from other states to help them, get those power lines back up, make sure everything is safe, and make sure that people have their electricity, because not everybody has a backup generator like a hospital, because sometimes those can cost thousands, if not millions of dollars, depending on how much electricity that you need. But it goes on to say it was founded in 1891, 2 years before George Westinghouse won the electric current wars by lighting the Chicago World's Columbian Exposition with alternating current, and before homes and businesses in the United States had begun receiving electricity. Now, I just want to make a note here that, big cities got electricity first before the more rural areas, especially in Oklahoma. So, for example, Tulsa and Oklahoma City, they got the electricity first because that's where a lot of the powerhouses were. So the way that these co-ops operated was, you have your main electrical company, which is Oklahoma General Electric, which is OG&E. They start in the cities, but when they wanted to make sure to expand out into the country, to make sure these farming communities and these smaller towns got electricity, that's when these co-ops were created. So that way they could get electricity as well, because even though not everybody had electricity, they still had food stores, general stores, mom and pop shops, hospitals, things like that. So they still needed to provide electricity to these smaller communities, because not everybody could go to the city for everything that they needed. So for example, I've actually met some women that are probably in their 80s or 90s, and they remember way back in the day when their mothers would give birth at home, because they lived out in the country, they lived in farming communities, and they were not near a hospital by any means. They may have been 50 to over 100 miles away from the closest hospital. So a lot of these small towns, they had just a family doctor that would deliver babies, basically a GP. A general practitioner back in those days, they delivered babies. They could see you for the flu. They could remove your appendix. They did everything. It was a general practice, literally. They handled so many things under the sun, and they had to, because they were out in the boonies, is what we called it. So, I think up until the 70s or 80s, there were still some general practitioners that were delivering babies out in these small towns, because hospitals were not way far out there. They had healthcare facilities, but they were small, few and far between, because, these women and these families, they needed proper medical care. Even if it wasn't a fancy hospital in the city, they still needed family health care. And so that's how that operated in that. So that's just a side note in regards to some historical background to Oklahoma, and how, you can still, how do I word this? You can still have a thriving community even if you're not comparable to a city. Because the goal is to continue to advance your society, to continue to advance your town, but you don't stop and get jealous, or you don't stop and get negative and think, well, the city has electricity, but we don't. You don't get negative or throw a pity party. All they did was just continue to live their lives. So, because a lot of these people, they did not have the luxury of having luxury. So, just remember that a lot of these places out in rural areas, they didn't even have street lights probably to the 50s or 60s. And if you think about it, like for example, I Dream a Genie was on TV in the 1960s, but then you've got people that live out in the boonies that they may not even have a television. So just imagine their surprise when they do get electricity and they turn on the television and they see Barbara Eden dressed as a genie and it looks like a harem. I just think that'd be really funny, because I love I Dream a Genie. It's one of my favorite shows. But anyway, that's a side note. But just to kind of give you some perspective in terms of electricity, and how, sometimes we take it for granted that we have lights and that we have a refrigerator and we have ovens and, all these modern conveniences. Because, just because there were modern conveniences in the 1950s, like on the show Leave It to Beaver, that doesn't mean all the United States had those modern conveniences. So, just kind of look at it that way. It kind of puts it in perspective. And, it's easier for states such as Oklahoma to have that general perspective, because we haven't always had the best of the best. We've come a long way, and we're doing really good as a state, I think. I mean, we're really doing awesome compared to what it could be, but just always moving forward, always striving for something best, regardless of whether you are in a union or not. That's probably the best way to go, because that's how I look at life. So it goes on to say it is an international organization based on the principle of collective bargaining. Its international president is Lonnie R. Stevenson and is affiliated with the AFL-CIO. The beginnings of the IBEW were in the Electrical Wiremen and Linemen's Union number 5221, founded in St. Louis, Missouri in 1890. By 1891, after sufficient interest was shown in a national union, a convention was held on November 21st, 1891 in St. Louis. At the convention, the IBEW, then known as the National Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, was officially formed. The American Federation of Labor gave the NBEW charter as an AFL affiliate on December 7, 1891. The union's official journal, The Electrical Worker, was first published on January 15, 1893, and has been published ever since. At the 1899 convention in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the union's name was officially changed to the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. The union went through lean times in its early years, then struggled through 6 years of schism during the 1910s, when two rival groups each claimed to be the duly elected leaders of the union. In 1919, as many employers were trying to drive unions out of the workplace through a national open shop campaign — I'd never heard of that. That might be interesting to research that — the union agreed to form the Council on Industrial Relations, a bi-party body made up of equal numbers of management and union representatives with the power to resolve any collective bargaining disputes. That's actually really smart to do that. Because even though I don't agree with everything, I always agree that it's best to come together and work it out. You'll have some middle ground and just have peace within your organization. That body still functions today and has largely resolved strikes in the IBEW's jurisdiction in the construction industry. That's really good to know, because sometimes the construction industry is very cutthroat. And I know that from living here in Oklahoma, because sometimes we get some shoddy construction companies that are not from Oklahoma. They're just these fly-by-night idiots that come in here, and they're not always licensed. Because it seems like every year there's almost always a scandal with people coming into Oklahoma from out of state that try and rip us a new one, whether it's in construction, roofers, tree trimmers, people laying pavement, things like that. So we know here in Oklahoma that we have to be extra careful, because our climate is very extreme, and because of the extreme weather here. And I'm not promoting global warming either way. I'm just saying that Oklahoma has always had extreme weather, regardless of what you believe in terms of theories. But that extreme weather affects our roads, it affects our houses, it affects our buildings, it affects everything. So when it affects your infrastructure as well, the state is constantly having to fight off these weasels and carpetbaggers from up north that don't really care about us, and they just want to rip us a new one financially. And whenever they try and rip us a new one financially, it can drastically affect our economy. So that will always bother me, because I believe in human rights, and I believe in being able to support yourself and your family regardless of what season you're suffering in your life. But I especially don't like it when crooks come down here and come to Oklahoma and act like we're stupid when we're not. That will always irritate me. So it goes on to say, in September 1941, the National Apprenticeship Standards for the Electrical Construction Industry, a joint effort among the IBEW, the National Electrical Contractors Association, and the Federal Committee on Apprenticeship, were established. The IBEW added additional training programs and courses as needed to keep up with new technologies, including an industrial electronics course in 1959 and an industrial nuclear power course in 1966. That's really smart to do that, because you want to keep up to date with the change in technology. Because if you think about how much technology changed from the 1930s to the 1940s, when we're going to war, then to the 1950s, we're coming out of war, but then we're dealing with nuclear power, things like that, and then we're going into the 1960s. So it's really good to keep up to date with how quickly technology changed within those few decades right there. It goes on to say, today the IBEW conducts apprenticeship programs for electricians, linesmen, and VDV, voice, data, and video installers who install low voltage wiring such as computer networks in conjunction with the National Electrical Contractors Association under the, I don't know what this word is, AUSPICES, auspices, I think. I'm not sure I pronounced that. Of the National Joint Apprenticeship and Training Committee, which allows apprentices to earn while you learn. I completely agree with that, and here's why. Sometimes you still need to earn money. You still need to make a living while you're learning your trade. Because I think one of the number one reasons why people don't take a job or they don't stay in the job market is because they're not given the opportunity to survive. They don't have access to food, water, and shelter while they're trying to establish themselves in the workforce. So then they give up, or maybe they don't even have the opportunity to enter the workforce because they don't have the skill sets yet. They have the desire and the talent, but they may not have the skill sets yet to earn that living. So this is really good that they're giving people an opportunity to earn a living wage and learn at the same time, and to grow their skill sets and realize their talents that they have. That's very excellent. That I completely agree with, because I wish that had happened to me. Because most of the time, that didn't happen to me. I had to hit the ground running, or I basically had no money coming in, and I had to find a way to find a job that would pay my bills while I'm trying to grow in my skill sets and make more money at that moment and later in time. In Canadian jurisdictions, the IBEW does not deliver apprenticeship training, but does conduct supplemental training for government-trained apprentices and journey, I think that's how you pronounce it, journey persons, often at little or no cost to its members. The IBEW Local 353 Toronto requires all apprentices to be registered with the JAC, which is the Joint Apprenticeship Council, for a number of safety courses, pre-apprenticeship training, pre-trade school courses, supplementary training, and pre-exam courses. The IBEW's membership peaked in 1972 at approximately 1 million members. The membership numbers were in a slow decline throughout the rest of the 1970s and the 1980s, but have since stabilized. One major loss of membership for the IBEW came about because of the court-ordered breakup at the end of 1982 of AT&T, where the IBEW was heavily organized among both telephone workers and in AT&T's manufacturing facilities. Oh, that's interesting. Membership as of 2020 stands at about 775,000, according to their official website. And then it lists all these different presidents, and they've had quite a few. Now, these are international presidents, so this may not mean that they're actually from the United States. So their presidents, man, they've had so many, from 1891 to current. And then it lists all their different conventions that they've had, going all the way back to November 1891. That's really cool, because it gives the locations as well. So that's really neat to see that. But this is a really neat union, and I'm glad to see that there's no scandals listed. That doesn't mean that there aren't any, but it's kind of refreshing to read something that's not loaded with problems. I would like to see their data on if they do audits throughout the year. As I've said previously in podcasts, I think every organization, whether they are unionized or not, needs to do an internal audit and an external audit twice a year, so that way you know your financials no matter what. Also, I think that it should be listed if they give any monies to political parties. I'm kind of surprised it doesn't list any of that, but maybe they're one of these unions that doesn't give to a political party, which would really just take my breath away. I mean, it would just shock me if they did not give to a political party, and if anything, it would be refreshing. I would love that. But one thing I did want to go over, and maybe I'm trying to think if I want to do this during this podcast or not. I guess I'll go ahead since we're only sitting at 19 minutes here. I got to thinking about this last night when I was thinking about what I wanted to talk about for the next podcast, and it dawned on me that I might be using a lot of words that people may not know what they mean because they've never worked as an auditor, or they may have never worked as an accountant. So it dawned on me that some people may not understand my frustration and my irritation, and a justified frustration and irritation, when you're looking at things from an auditor point of view and how you expect an organization to function, especially when they're dealing with millions of dollars. So what I'm going to do right now is go through how an auditor and a staff accountant looks at things and why things pop up as a red flag to us in this industry. Because, our brain is trained to be that way, but also my brain naturally thinks that way. Like, it catches stuff quickly because my brain operates like a ticker tape. It kind of reminds me of, the movie The Matrix, when you see all those numbers and symbols going up on the screen and it's just moving really fast. That's what my brain is like. When it's looking at data, and most of the time I'm scanning stuff first and I'm looking for things that I know are wrong. And then I go back and I really dig into it. And that's what you do with this kind of data. So I'm going to discuss some of these things and kind of make it clearer of, how to look at organizations in a functional, professional business manner as opposed to an emotional manner, if that makes sense. Because I think sometimes we get emotional about what we join, what we believe in. But I've learned over the years to not get overly emotionally involved in things because, first of all, it's very taxing on your immune system, your central nervous system, your heart, your lungs, and also your arteries and your blood vessels, especially the blood vessels in your brain, because stress is hard on your body. And you have to really monitor your emotions. Like, I look at things from a physical point of view as well. And also, I know that for me personally, being female, it's very easy to get emotionally attached to something and be really involved in something. So being that I know how I naturally am, just how I am physically, I know to restrain myself. I know to control my mind, my words, my emotions, and to look at things from a non-personal point of view, look at it from a business point of view and from a professional point of view, because there is peace and calm in that. And it helps you to see things correctly. That doesn't mean that women are horrible or that they have a hard time with that. It's just that these are principles that I have applied to my life and my daily life to make sure that, number one, I'm having a happy and peaceful life as much as possible. Number two, that whoever I work for, that I can give them my best. Because I'll put it this way, like, I've worked with guys that were just as emotional as women, if not worse, and you know what? It was horrible. It was just like, wow, I just was not expecting that. And, when I go to work, I am all business. Like, whatever is going on in my personal life or private life, it stops at the front door at my place of work. The moment my pinky toe steps foot on that property of my employer, all the drama, which I hardly have any drama in my life, but anything that is bothering me in my personal life, I shut that off the moment my pinky toe gets on the property of my employer. Because I don't ever want to be seen as a disadvantage to my employer. I want to be seen as part of the team. And I want to be a part of that fellowship. And it's hard to be a part of a good team if you're not bringing your best. And I think sometimes we get caught in the trap of, it's one thing to be human. It's another thing to be wrapped up in our situations. And that doesn't mean that we ignore our problems and think, oh, my stuff's not important when it is. But it's just, for me personally, whatever was going on or is going on in my private life or my personal life, it always brings me and has always brought me a lot of peace to work. Because work to me was a break. It was a much needed break from the personal stuff going on in my life. That's why I love to work so much. I can work anywhere from 40 to 80 hours a week, typically. And I love that, because not only do I get to earn a living, I get to pay my taxes, I get to save up for retirement, I get to save up for a vacation, but I also get to take a break from my personal life, and I love that. And plus also, while I'm taking a break, mentally is what I mean, while I'm taking a break from the stressors of daily life and personal life, I get to be successful at my job. And I think that's real important for everyone to feel that sense of accomplishment, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So, but, let me kind of go over some specifics here and, really dive into some of the terms that I've been using throughout these podcasts, because I think it will make more sense. And if you already know what these mean, that's great. But if you don't, this will help you understand the red flags that I see very quickly. So I'll be right back in just a moment. Okay, so the first definition we're going to take a look at is misappropriation. because I've used that a lot throughout these podcasts, these episodes, in regards to misappropriation of funds. So here's what it says. In law, misappropriation is the unauthorized use of another's name, likeness, identity, property, discoveries, inventions, etc., without that person's permission, resulting in harm to that person. Another use of the word refers to intentional and illegal use of property or funds. That's what I'm referring to when I say misappropriation of funds. It can particularly refer to when done by a public official, which you don't have to be in the public sector to commit that. And it goes on to say, in criminal law, misappropriation is the intentional, illegal use of the property or funds of another person for one's own use or other unauthorized purpose, particularly by a public official, a trustee of a trust, an executor or administrator of a deceased person's estate, or by any person with a responsibility to care for and protect another's assets, such as a fiduciary duty. Depending upon the jurisdiction and value of the property, misappropriation may be a felony, a crime punishable by a prison sentence. Then it says, in terms of scientific research, in scientific research, misappropriation is a type of research misconduct. An investigator, scholar, or reviewer can obtain several novel ideas during the process of the exchange of ideas amongst colleagues and peers. However, improper use of such information could institute fraud. I agree. This can include plagiarism of work or to make use of any information in breach of any duty of confidentiality associated with the review of manuscripts or grant applications. Then it goes on to say consequences of misappropriation. Misappropriation can have very serious consequences, including imprisonment, fines, probation, and a permanent criminal record. The punishment for misappropriation may be determined by the value of the property affected and previous criminal record. Now it says here the differences between misappropriation and embezzlement, because these are very similar but at the same time different. And it also is different in terms of how the actions are taken to do something illegal, and also what the consequences are. Embezzlement is misappropriation when the property or funds involved have been lawfully entrusted to the embezzler. In circumstances where the funds are accessible to, but not entrusted to, the perpetrator, it is not embezzlement but can still be considered larceny, misappropriation, misapplication, or some other similar term. So, one thing that came to mind when I thought of misappropriation of funds and embezzlement was Susan B. Coleman Foundation. I was working for a retailer back when I was like 19 or 20. I'm not going to say their name because heaven forbid I get sued. I was working for a retailer part-time while I was in college, and it was discovered that the Susan B. Coleman Foundation was donating, or what I would call misappropriation of funds. They were giving monies to Planned Parenthood. And like my mouth just dropped because I thought, that is unbelievably wrong and illegal, but they got away with it because they're a foundation and for other reasons. I have no doubt they wormed their way out of it. I mean, it really bothered people because, you know, when people were donating to Susan B. Coleman, they were not giving money so that so that women could have abortions. They were giving money to Susan B. Coleman Foundation to help women that have been diagnosed with breast cancer, to help them to get the treatments that they need, help them to get the mammograms they need to treat breast cancer early, and also to help them financially, help these women stay alive and defeat the disease. Abortion is not a part of breast cancer treatment. So I would think that would be obvious, but that was one of the things that came to mind when I initially came across misappropriation of funds. And so what happened in that situation was our employer wanted us to be a part of the Susan B. Coleman walk for breast cancer, and we had to wear these shirts with the pink ribbon, which I don't wear it anymore. I don't ever wear a pink ribbon because I don't agree with what Susan B. Coleman did, the foundation, not the person, but the foundation, which would be run by her sister. And so I was the only employee that refused to be a part of that walk. And I was the youngest woman that worked at this retailer, probably by 20 to 35 years of age. I was that much younger than most of these women. And when I refused to be a part of the Susan B. Coleman walk and not show up with my employer, and this is outside of work, and we're not getting paid to do this, almost every single one of those women turned on me. And then some of them started harassing me and lying about me at work. And I was maybe 19 or 20. I was really young. And what I found interesting was that I was the only one at my employer that stood up for what's right and said, hey, I am not going to raise money for this organization if it's going to Planned Parenthood. If someone wants to donate to Planned Parenthood, they need to make that check out to Planned Parenthood, not Susan B. Coleman. Because otherwise, that's fraud. That is a form of fraud to donate monies to this organization, and then the organization says, oh, no, we're going to donate your money on your behalf without telling you. And we're going to give it to Planned Parenthood or to whatever organization. It doesn't matter if it's Planned Parenthood or some other organization, I don't know what, maybe like podiatry or something, who knows what, I don't really care. But either way, it happened to be really bad with Planned Parenthood because Oklahoma is very much against abortion. So it just kind of shocked us because it's like all these people were donating to help preserve life. They didn't want to donate to something that takes life away. Because that's what abortion does. It stops something, whether you think it's a person or not. It stops those cells from growing and becoming a human being. So you technically are taking life away when you do that. But anyway, and I wasn't like, I wasn't necessarily pro-life as much as I am now back then. But I just didn't agree with this organization lying to us and then expecting and then, getting these companies, these retailers to go along with it and then expecting us to put the label of Susan B. Coleman Foundation on our T-shirts and wear them at this walk. And I'm like, I can't wear that. I can't be a part of something that I don't agree with because I don't agree with what they're doing with their money that they have received from people. And I'll tell you what, it really shocked me when most of the women that were mean to me were baby boomers, which I found very interesting. Because what I find interesting about that is that generation really fought for abortion to be legalized back in the day, in the 70s, when they were all pretty much feminists, regardless of what state you lived in. But it's like, what I found interesting with these older women, and I'm looking at this from a teenager point of view, right? Like 19, 20 years old. I was really young compared to these women. I just thought it was odd that when they were my age, they were all for abortion. Give us our abortions. That's what we want. But then they get older and they're like, once they get married and want to have a family, then they think that whatever they're pregnant with actually is a person. But when they were single, they didn't think it was a person. They thought they could just destroy it and get rid of it because it wasn't important or valid. But it's like once they have that wedding band on their finger, now it's a person. And I just thought that was really hypocritical because I'm just kind of standing there staring at them like, what in the world? It was so weird. It was so shady. Then also, they were pro-abortion, pro-choice when they were my age at that time. But then once they get married, have a family, and now they're older, now they're Republican. Now they're conservative. But now they claim to be conservative and Republican, but then when it comes to like some of these organizations, they really haven't changed. It was so confusing as a young person because typically when you work with way older people, you tend to think that they know what they're talking about and they have wisdom and guidance. These women did not. I was very disappointed, and then they turned on me because I didn't agree with what they wanted to do. Like, I was kind of on the fence about abortion back then. Like, I knew that I probably would not ever get one if I was in that situation. But at the same time, I valued human life a lot because I value my life. And it was really conflicting to me for these older women to be so mean to me because I disagreed with what this organization was doing, and even management was against me. And they were putting pressure on me to stand in solidarity with them publicly. And I just thought, we have every right to associate who we want to associate with outside of work. And if I don't want to associate with an organization, I don't have to. Like, that's not part of the job responsibility. That wasn't part of what I agreed to when I applied to the job and then when I started working there. And so, needless to say, that job did not work out very long after that because management was so hateful and horrible to me, and some of these employees were really bad to me. Now the younger women, the women that were around my age, they were in the same boat as me. Like, we kind of felt trapped. It was really weird because, we're the ones that are young, going to college, we're dating, and, one of the girls I worked with, she was engaged to get married, and she would just roll her eyes at these older women because they would, they put on the whole, oh, I'm a mother card. They put that cap on their head that day, or they put that feather in their cap that day. But then when it comes to certain social issues, they rip that feather out and put in a different one. Like, it was very hypocritical, and we were just like, can't this just be about work? That's what really bothered us at our job, and we were the part-time workers. It really bothered us that, we just wanted to come to work. We didn't want to be a part of any special political party, any kind of agenda. We didn't want to be bombarded with these causes where it's Susan B. Coleman or Planned Parenthood or PETA or whatever the case may be. I mean, we didn't want to be bothered with that. We were just there to work, to sell the goods of the store. And unfortunately, some of this stuff came down from corporate, and corporate wanted to know who was not willing to participate, and they were mean to us. So eventually a lot of the young women left, and so we ended up getting jobs elsewhere because it was turning into such a bad place to work that, it just, the agenda of the company, the political agenda, interfered with the job. And it was creating a hostile work environment. And it was like the young or the old against the young against the old. Even though we were doing everything we could to work well together, it was just this, it was like a snake pit working with these women that just had a chip on their shoulder. And it's just like, what I wish I had said back then, what I wish I should have said, but I wasn't educated enough. And I didn't really have enough courage back then. I really just wanted to say, look, I don't care what you believe in. I still respect you. I just wish that you would respect me. We're here to work together. This place used to be fun to work. Let's have fun. We see each other quite a bit throughout the week. Like, I'm not against you. Like, I just want to have a nice work environment. But their behavior so shocked me that most of the time, me and the other young chickadees, we didn't know what to say. So we would just walk off in shock, like our mouths would be dropped. And what sucked, what was really bad, was that customers would overhear this. And so whenever these older women were going off on us, some of these customers would not shop there anymore because of what they were overhearing. And it's like, thanks a lot, now we're losing our sales. So, the workplace should be about work. It shouldn't be about a cause. I don't care if it's for saving the planet, or if it's a Planned Parenthood thing, or if it's environmental, or even if it's a Christian cause or something. None of that should affect the workplace, because the workplace is supposed to be neutral. And unfortunately, this one was not. So, but that's one of the things that you have to remember. Like, when there's misappropriation of any kind, it destroys the workplace. It destroys the organization. And unfortunately, because of the misappropriation of funds within this retailer, and where they were saying it was going, and then who we were giving it to was not giving it to the correct organization within the organization, it led to problems at our place of work. So, that's how misappropriation can affect things. Even if you're not directly involved, it kind of is like a spider web, and it just kind of infiltrates everything in a really bad way. That was one of the first ways that I came across misappropriation of funds, was just working a part-time job and noticing some problems. And so that's kind of how I got to thinking about this stuff and where my experience comes from in that. So, but, we're getting close to 40 minutes, so I'll go ahead and stop here for now. Probably for the next podcast, let me take a look at another one that we're going to take a look at. The next labor union we're going to take a look at is the Laborers International Union of North America. It was started in 1903. It says it is miscellaneous construction workers and other trades, so it's probably going to be a large one. because they're encompassing quite a few different types of labor. So until next time, I pray that you're happy, healthy, and whole, that you're doing what you love, and that you just have a wonderful day and a wonderful week. Thank you so much for joining me. Until next time, ciao.